For centuries, humanity has been left grappling with the impossible, the mysterious, and the inexplicable. From ghostly phenomenons to unexplained vanishings, from secret languages to missing vessels that continue to elude all rational explanation, they've left us captivated and unsettled. Number 10. Tenerife, an island in Spain, is a popular destination with the people of the UK, given its year-round sunshine and favorable weather. Cheap, intoxicating beverages, agreeable costs of living, and a 4 to 5 hour flight make it the perfect party destination. It was this life that Englishman Ricky Decotta was after. In March of 1987, the then 23-year-old Londoner headed to the island for a partying, carefree lifestyle, where he'd become immersed in the 80s club scene. Once here, Ricky took up a job as a party organizer at the Sgt. Pepper's Disco Pub in the Playa de las Americas resort. In October of that same year, Ricky made contact with his family and told them that he'd be returning home soon. But this would never happen. Just 6 months into his stay on the island, Ricky had disappeared, never to be seen or heard from again. His movements were unknown, witnesses were rare, and information on the investigative efforts was limited. Not long after the vanishing, the missing man's bag and passport enigmatically turned up, and they were handed over to the police, and this would become the first trace of Ricky since he went missing. But it was a dead end. The trail went cold, and without social media, the story faded from existence. The only indication of any efforts in the search for the missing man came from the hands of family and friends who placed advertisements in the local newspapers. Speculation as to what happened to him began circulating, and later some strange reports would begin to emerge. Alleged sightings detailed that Ricky was still alive, but he was confused and barefoot. Some stated that they'd seen him wandering the island's hotspots, claiming to be Jesus, while other sightings depicted him as wearing an expensive white suit, and others placed him in a South London clothes shop. It's uncertain if the tips were followed up on, or if any of them were substantiated. Despite searches and appeals for information, Ricky's family remains in limbo with grief and hope. No signs of Ricky Decotta have since come about, and his disappearance remains an intriguing mystery, with seemingly no answers. Number 9. It was the closing weeks of 1964 when the CIA found themselves grappling with anxiety in the wake of some terrifying news. On the 16th of October that year, a large mushroom cloud was spotted over a missile testing range in China. This indicated that the Chinese scientists were not too long away from holding pure destructive havoc in their hands. This advancement underscored the agency's espionage efforts in the Far East. Details regarding China's destructive device were already hard to come by, but the development was seen as an unwelcome one nonetheless amid the Cold War. But America was not the only country that was in distress over the advancement. Officials from India were also clasped between the fingers of anxiety, since they'd already felt the business end of China's military during the border dispute. America and India focused their interests on self-preservation, so the two nations found themselves shaking hands on a clandestine pact that combined China-watching efforts. Photo satellites at the time were still too primitive for spying, and planes were far too conspicuous. But the CIA soon landed their eyes on a different vantage point that would allow them to keep an eye on China's weapons test. The vantage point was India's Nanda Devi, which finds itself named one of the tallest mountains in the Himalayan mountain range. Nanda Devi offered an unobstructed view for a powerful electronic eye. With the plan in mind, the CIA and officials from India set out to make it happen. A year after the Chinese nuclear weapons test, a crew of secret climbers gathered at the sanctuary, a fortress of the Himalayan mountains that surrounded the objective. Only 6 climbers had ever managed to summit the behemoth, and only 3 of the 6 survived the descent. The CIA plan would make this climb even more troubling, given that the crew had to hoist a very heavy surveillance package up the mountain with them. For several days, the crew climbed, led by Captain Coley. They made use of ice axes and spiked shoes, gradually making their way to the next camp, the last stop before reaching the summit. As the team settled into their last camp, the sky over Nanda Devi began to grow dark, with frigid air signaling an autumn blizzard. With these upcoming threats, Coley decided it was in everyone's best interest to turn back and postpone the mission until spring. He ordered that the surveillance package be lashed onto the side of the mountain. This would make their next descent easier and would give room for better climbing equipment. The team secured the antenna, nuclear generator, and 2 transceiver sets on an outcropping and fled from the unfavorable weather. Spring came around, and the team returned to their climb with the plan of retrieving the nuclear package and toting it up the summit. But when they reached the last camp where they left the devices, they discovered something alarming. The stash was gone. For the next 2 years, the CIA sent scores of climbers carrying Geiger counters to comb the cityscape for any trace of the missing potential power plant. In those 2 years, no one ever found the artifact. Panic still engulfs the United States and the agencies of India, as the question still remains where the nuclear-powered device may be resting, and to this day, no trace of it has ever been found. Number 8. Theron Wade Stanberry was just 18 years old when he enigmatically disappeared from San Francisco, California, back in the middle of 1980. Theron's abrupt and inexplicable disappearance left investigators, family, friends, and mystery enthusiasts scratching their heads. His story begins in Oregon, where his aunt and grandmother raised him. Excited to explore the rest of the world, the young man packed up his bags in 1979 and boarded a Greyhound bus destined for the East Coast. Amid his travels, Theron kept regular contact with his grandmother, consistently informing her of his whereabouts. In May or June of 1980, he would make his expected update for the last time. He made a call to his grandmother from San Francisco. Theron told her that he was happy and content there. He was living with a group of other young men in a hotel. But the young man had been met with some unfortunate luck. He'd lost his job and was in need of money. On that same day that he last contacted his grandmother, Theron allegedly established communication with his biological mother, also asking for money, but she refused to send any. After this day, no one would hear from Theron again, as he left an enduring mystery in his wake. As weeks went by and the family began to grow concerned, they decided to call the hotel where he'd been staying. The hotel claimed that Theron had abruptly left, didn't pay his bill, and left all of his belongings behind. According to some resources, it said that the missing man had stayed at the International Hotel, a residential building at the intersection of Jackson and Lerny in Manilatown. But further research into the hotel revealed it wasn't in operation in 1980, since it had been the subject of dispute between the Filipino population and the city officials who were planning a revitalization of the area. It appeared as though the last residents of the hotel were evicted in 1977, and it remained vacant until 1981 when it was demolished. Following a search of the California Unclaimed Property database, it was discovered that Theron had a small amount of money in a bank account. His address on record placed his residence at 1139 Market Street, apartment 218. The address seemed to be that of the National Hotel, another residential hotel that was in operation in 1980. Theron's uncle would then contact the hotel where his nephew was reportedly last seen. It was claimed that he visited a man there who would later pass away from an incurable illness. It's this part of the story that confuses many. The man in question that Theron allegedly visited was not named, and it was never clarified if he lived in the hotel, if he was staying in a different room, or if he was one of the young men in the group that Theron had told his grandmother about. Sadly, despite having pursued the case tirelessly for years, the missing man's uncle hasn't come any closer to a resolution. Further adding to the unsolvability of this mystery is that the missing person report that was filed in Oregon never made its way to the San Francisco authorities. Number 7. In 1961, in the Romanian city of Sibiu, a strange discovery was made accidentally. It was a 450-page document that held information that was seemingly impossible given the time it was written. Dubbed the Sibiu manuscript, it was attributed to an Austrian military engineer named Konrad Haas. He'd survived the Habsburg Empire and worked in Sibiu back in the 1500s. Haas showed a keen interest in technology, and while it hasn't entirely been confirmed, it's believed that he was behind the annotations in the manuscript. The origins of the author and how he came across this knowledge remain unknown. The German manuscript was found to be a theoretical work on the construction of weapons and multi-stage rocket technology, It was this engineer who's credited as the first to document the ideas of multi-stage rockets, spacecraft, and liquid-fueled propulsion, a concept only realized in the 20th century. The pages reveal drawings and annotations relating to some advanced futuristic artifacts and even space travel, with mentions of flights to the moon. Technical data on artillery, ballistics, and a mysterious potential rocket launch dot the pages, leaving a strange mystery in their wake. Detailed descriptions and rocket diagrams with stabilizing fins bring various questions into consideration. The manuscript covers concepts far beyond the known technology of the 1500s. These concepts, such as the multi-stage rockets and stabilization techniques, demonstrated knowledge that would later become central to modern-day rocket science. Some even see this manuscript as a potential precursor to the technology that would have enabled space exploration. Haas's sketches, designs, and knowledgeable notes make us wonder if these historical societies were more advanced than we give them credit for. Number 6. The year was 1988 in Atlanta, where Lisa Bishop, a 23-year-old journalism student, had been studying at the University of Georgia. At the time, she was dating a man named Paul Cornwell, who was running a local club. It was here that an aspiring journalist would meet a German national who called himself Florian Meyer-Borchert. At this point, Lisa was taking her first steps into a story about the differences between America and Haitian economies. It appears that her writing plans had been discussed with Florian, who then informed her that he just happened to be the captain of a ship that was due to set sail to Haiti. That ship was the Freedom, which was docked in Miami. Florian invited Lisa to accompany him on the trip, and despite protests from her boyfriend and family, she accepted. The pair left Atlanta and headed for Florida. On the 17th of December of that year, they boarded the ship with 7 Haitian crew members and set sail. This would be the last time that anyone would see Lisa Bishop. Family and friends only became alarmed when she failed to make contact with them on Christmas Day. Similar distress was noted among the families of the Haitian crew members, prompting authorities to intervene. The police did a sweep of the area where the vessel had last been seen, but they found no trace of the Freedom anywhere. It was quickly assumed that it had sunk with all on board, but once news of the missing boat began to circulate, an eyewitness made a startling claim. Underwater salvager Bob Nyberg had seen that very missing vessel in Georgetown Harbor on Grand Cayman Island. This was 500 miles away from its assumed destination. This report came 2 weeks after the Freedom supposedly vanished. Bob explained that in January, he'd been working in Grand Cayman when a ship came in. Bob and his crew had been under the water and came up to move out of the way as it drew closer. The salvager recalled its name, the Freedom, and even made a statement to his friend saying, "These guys need their freedom. They can't even spell the word." The ship remained at the harbor for the rest of the afternoon, and by the time Bob returned to work the following morning, it was gone. Paul, Lisa's boyfriend, decided to seize the opportunity to follow up on this lead and teamed up with the salvager. The two began speaking to witnesses in Grand Cayman. They learned that the mysterious Florian had been there in the company of a Haitian man, Felipe. Felipe is said to be the one who chartered the ship for its trip to Haiti. Paul went from Grand Cayman back to Atlanta, where he would speak with a woman who was alleged to have been storing Florian's personal possessions. Among these effects was a picture of Felipe. The woman Paul spoke to explained that he was involved in some sort of smuggling business, one on a large scale. She stated that something had gone wrong. The group had gotten involved in something serious, something much too harsh for Lisa to handle. This lead had ultimately run cold with no sign of Lisa or the mysterious Florian, who was the key to unlocking the mystery. Since the disappearance of the Freedom, various unsubstantiated reports have flooded in, citing that it's been renamed the Freeliant. Through further investigation, Paul was able to track down the man's family, who stated that they hadn't heard from him since 1988. Most intriguingly, the most recent sighting of the Freedom came about in 2013, allegedly witnessed by a member of the Navy. Despite claims of seeing the vessel, talks of a smuggling business, and names of crew members, the disappearance of Lisa Bishop and the mystery surrounding the Freedom remains unsolved. Number 5. James Hampton was a seemingly unassuming man. He was born in 1909 in South Carolina in Ellery, a community of farmers and sharecroppers. His father was a gospel singer, and he had 3 other siblings growing up. At the age of 19, James headed for Washington, D.C., where he would live with his older brother. In 1942, he was drafted into the Army and served in the Second World War. Following his discharge, this unassuming individual secured a job as a janitor at the GSA. He would remain in this line of work until his passing in 1964. Not much was known about his life. James lived alone in a small apartment, never got married, never had children, and was known to be reclusive. But upon his passing, something strange materialized in a garage. It was a small garage that the man had rented in 1950, where he would work on something special during his free time for 14 years. Whatever he was working on wouldn't be revealed until his passing, when the garage's owner visited it only to find a mystery. That mystery took the form of an incredible religious art installation made from scavenged materials. The Hampton family showed no interest in collecting the art piece, and it was subsequently placed on sale in the local newspaper. Fortunately though, an artist, Ed Kelly, checked it out and gathered several artists to view the piece too. One was Harry Lowe, who was working for the Smithsonian American Art Museum, and claimed that walking into that garage was like opening Tut's tomb. Within the confines of 4 walls was a magnum opus of James Hampton. It was called The Throne of the Third Heaven of the Nation's Millennium General Assembly, a complex structure of a throne made of plastic, cardboard, and other elements found around the neighborhood, including light bulbs and jelly jars. But the artistic installation was not the only thing they had left behind. Accompanying the creation was the most mysterious item, named America's Most Enduring Mystery. It was a 174-page-long handwritten note titled St. James, the Book of the Seventh Dispensation. The book was only partially informative. It told us that the artist referred to himself as St. James, and that he had apparently various religious visions and revelations. James had written about the Second Coming at the end of the millennium. The throne he created was meant to be a monument to Jesus. All this deduced information, though, had come from the English section of the notebook. The rest of the pages were all written in an unknown script, dubbed Hamptonese by scholars. The scribbles consisted of 42 varying symbols, and no one knew what any of them meant. Academic efforts were made, making use of the hidden Markov models to find out if Hamptonese could be a substitution cipher, but this was ruled out as an option. Authors of hidden Markov models theorized that the scribbles were possibly the equivalent of a godly tongue, but this idea, though, was not well accepted. 42 symbols were just too precise of a number, and given the repetitions, it became clear that the notes were written with intent. Dennis Stallings, an independent researcher of coded documents, investigated the secret writings and concluded that they were not indecipherable gibberish. Stallings stated that the same words are seen at corresponding spots in 2 separate drawings of tablets of the 10 Commandments. This reveals that the notes are unlikely to be the equivalent of speaking in tongues. This revelation, though, did not mean that deciphering the cryptic text was going to be easy. Stalling first tried to match each symbol to an English letter, with E being the most common English letter. This means that the most used symbol may be referencing that letter. But Stalling quickly discovered that it was not that simple. The letter forms appeared similar to Adrenka, which would have been a variation of the symbolism. It's also possible that St. James had derived his code from Gula, a Creole language. The truth is, we may never know how he encrypted his notebook. Number 4. Judith Ann Brown was originally from New York City, where she was raised among 7 siblings. In 1975, the family relocated to Kansas amid financial concerns. Life in New York was unaffordable, prompting their move. This came just in time for an inheritance of a farm in the rural town of Coldwater. Judith, known to most as Judy though, decided to remain in New York instead. She lived with her maternal grandmother in Flushing, Queens, where she would be attending college. It was also here that she would check herself into the Creedmoor Psychiatric Center following a mental health episode. She admitted herself as a patient there voluntarily on the 3rd of August in 1976. Judy's maternal grandparents headed to Creedmoor to sign their daughter out and rather take her to a similar facility known as Hillside Hospital. She remained there for 2 to 3 months before being discharged. Upon her release, Judy would be transitioned into an outpatient program through Hillside, which would provide her with adequate housing in Kew Gardens. In order to keep her housing in the care apartments, she was required to attend group therapy sessions. During her time in Creedmoor, though, Judy had met someone. He was a 31-year-old man named Richard Reisenberg, who'd been in the facility as well. The two had kindled a relationship, but it's unknown exactly when this started. Just before Judy was to transition to the outpatient program, Reisenberg had proposed to her, and they were engaged. Little did she or her family know at the time that Judy had just gotten engaged to a dangerous man. On the 10th of January, 1971, 6 years before their meeting, Reisenberg had taken the lives of his wife, Diane, and son, Andrew. It was just after 6:30 that evening when a psychotic event befell the home in Glen Oaks, Queens on 74th Avenue. Reisenberg reportedly suffered a mental episode leading to the event and to his admission into Creedmoor. After finding him not guilty of the homicide and deeming him criminally insane, the man was due to stay in the facility until he could be rehabilitated. But once the New York Police Department found out that Reisenberg was going to be released, they took action to have him transferred to a more secure facility. In 1977, a Creedmoor staff member presumably tipped the patient off, and he was quick to mobilize himself and Judy, who was in Hillside. At some point in the late days of April, Reisenberg and Judy fled from New York City and vanished into thin air. No one has seen or heard from them since. Prior to her disappearance, the 19-year-old had written letters to her family, detailing her plans to marry the man she met in the facility. She stated that they would be wed in a Unitarian church, but no one knows if they ever married. Sources indicate that the FBI, who listed Reisenberg as a fugitive, continued to look for him until 1984, but after that, leads grew cold. It wasn't until 2009 that Judy was considered a missing person, and the NYPD cold case unit didn't open her case until 2012. Her family was never contacted by law enforcement following the disappearance. Very little information has been spread about Judith Brown, aside from being referred to as his girlfriend in articles concerning the fugitive Richard Reisenberg. Neither of the two has ever been located, and given the man's history of violent behavior, Judy is considered to be in danger. Number 3. The year was 2008, and Barbara Blount, a 58-year-old woman, found herself becoming increasingly closer to her two grown children, Ricky and Christy, following the passing of her husband. The widow lived on the same street as her son and daughter in Livingston Parish. While she was living alone at this time, Barbara would often make dinner for her children on a daily basis. She also remained in close contact with her relatives and was active in the local Baptist church. The woman was known to also give her sister a ride to medical appointments. Ricky and Christy described their loving mother as extremely cautious. She wouldn't open a door for a stranger and would even carry a firearm with her when she went out to milk the cows. This is why her sudden and unexplainable disappearance came as a shock. On the 2nd of May that year, around 11:30, Barbara chatted with her neighbor and told her that she'd be cleaning out her kitchen cabinets. This exchange would be the last time that anybody had spoken to the widow. Fear was instilled in the community and relatives when her nephew swung by the house later that day. He had discovered the front door ajar and all the windows were oddly open. As he stepped into the house, the nephew discovered something even more alarming. It was Barbara's phone on the floor with the battery removed. Pots and pans littered the kitchen floor, stacked up one on another, indicating that she'd been interrupted while cleaning. It didn't take long for authorities to arrive at the scene, believing that they were about to step into a burglarized home. Police found no signs of forced entry or struggle, and all the valuables were left untouched. It wasn't a robbery. Further investigations into the surrounding area found that Barbara's 2006 silver Toyota Camry was not in the house. The woman was subsequently reported missing, and search efforts were underway. By the afternoon that same day, the missing vehicle had been suspiciously found a quarter-mile away from the home. It was parked on a dirt road on the property of a hunting club, 25 to 30 yards from the main road, and partially hidden in the trees, but Barbara was nowhere to be seen. The Camry's floor was wet, possibly due to the recent heavy rains, and the keys had been uncovered just 20 yards away, buried in gravel. Authorities enlisted the aid of search dogs, helicopters, and four-wheelers. They scoured the woods and waterways, but there was still no sign of the missing woman. It didn't take long for various theories to come into play, one of which surrounded the unfortunate passing of Barbara's husband. Henry Blount had been in an accident in June of 2004 when he was 55 years old. He was driving a gasoline tanker truck over the tracks and was struck by a train. It was an unfortunate accident that took the lives of not only Henry, but 2 railroad employees. Members of the locomotive union blamed him for the passings and the accident. The possibility that this was linked to the disappearance was reportedly looked into, but no connection was ever made. To this day, the case of Mrs. Barbara Blount remains unsolved. Number 2. Various intriguing cases have surrounded downriver communities for decades. The most baffling of these took place just over 70 years ago. It was the 1937 disappearance of 2 women and a man in Melvindale, a mystery that would soon become known as the Melvindale Trio. The case was known nationwide and became one of the largest non-criminal manhunts known to Michigan. The events would begin in October of that year, when the 3 individuals found themselves at the Hollywood Cafe, for which they departed never to be seen again. One of the victims in this mass disappearance has been left shrouded in mystery, and that's Margaret Boyd Redden. She was from Buffalo, New York, and had come to Detroit with her parents in 1915. She married James Redden there in 1925, and started work at T.A. Bollinger Real Estate, a business that adjoins the Hollywood Cafe. By the time Margaret disappeared, she and James were already split up. Artie Carson Mabee was the oldest of the missing 3. She was from Clearwater, Idaho, and married Sylvester Mabee in Butte, Montana in 1917. The couple moved to Detroit in 1925, and Artie soon became well acquainted with Margaret. Thomas Lorimer, the 3rd missing Melvindale individual, immigrated with his family to Quebec, Canada, where he would marry Evelyn Fleming. They then moved to Melvindale in 1936, where he began working at the American Malting Corporation. In the early months of 1937, he had just purchased an Oldsmobile. Thomas knew Margaret through business. He'd been making his car payments at her workplace. It's unknown if Artie knew him beforehand or not, but on the 15th of October, they'd become acquainted nonetheless. Around 1 a.m., the trio climbed into Thomas's new car and drove away from the Hollywood Cafe. 2 hours later, they all returned, where Melvindale officers Leonard Anderson and Harry Bringleson would see them. They pulled the vehicle over and spoke to the 3 inside. After a brief exchange, the officers let them go since nothing appeared out of order. Instead of going into the establishment, though, the police watched as the car pulled away, disappearing into the darkness on Oakwood and heading for Dearborn. As soon as it was established that Thomas, Margaret, and Artie were missing, an investigation ensued. Early on in the efforts, police would find that all 3 practiced steady habits and were not known to remain away from home for extended periods. They each had very little money between them and took no extra items such as clothing. Valuables were also found to have been left behind. It would be established that the Oldsmobile only had about 5 gallons of gas in it, and it would be revealed that Artie's upper dental plate had gone for repairs, which she would need to reclaim at this point. Her vehicle was discovered parked outside the cafe. After conducting multiple interviews with family, friends, and co-workers, police were unable to establish a motive for the disappearance. Other police agencies in Michigan were also roped into the mystery. They were searching high and low for any trace of them. The Rouge River was dragged, and so was the Detroit River shoreline, and both efforts yielded no results. Sylvester Mabee would later offer a $500 reward for any information that may lead to the return of his wife, but no tips ever surfaced. The Melvindale police also scoured Ford Woods with the aid of 50 volunteers and numerous hounds, with no further clues ever surfacing. Authorities then made use of an aerial search that flew over rivers and lakes, but still there was nothing. It had been a month, and hope among families was wearing thin. Theories and rumors began circulating in the town, with talks of homicide and an intentional disappearance being the most popular. Following a tip from an unchecked source, investigators branched out to California and then to Mexico. Claims were made that Thomas had crossed into Mexico, but this was false. The vehicle that he was driving never crossed the state line. In December of that year, a private detective claimed to have spotted the vehicle, allegedly occupied by Artie and Thomas in Duluth, Minnesota, but further investigation yielded nothing. Midway through the following year, new investigations were underway. Detroit detectives began re-questioning everyone connected to the missing trio in an effort to put an end to the triple homicide theories. In 1940, the case was rehashed again, with detectives seeking new leads. From then until the present, various articles have appeared, revisiting the lengthy case. No fresh tips, clues, or theories have ever come about, though. Numerous cars have since been recovered from the Detroit and Rouge rivers, but none of them have ever been the 1937 Oldsmobile. Number 1. The late 70s saw drastic changes for Lorraine Ray Herbster, better known as Lori. During her junior year, she dropped out of Burlington County Vocational and Technical School. By the Christmas of 1978, she would call off the wedding with her then fiancé and began looking for a new job. In March of the following year, Lori finally found a suitable career and began her new job at Microcircuit, where she worked as a photo lab technician. According to family, friends, and coworkers, the 17-year-old seemed to like her new job, and she was also looking forward to getting her driver's license. But with these promising changes, there also came one alteration that would spark an enduring mystery. It was her disappearance. On the 9th of March, Lori, who'd been working at a Microcircuit for a week, clocked out at 4 o'clock that mild afternoon and began her journey back to West Hampton Township, located in Burlington County, New Jersey. A coworker offered to give her a lift and dropped her off on the corner of Beverly Rancocas Road and Holly Lane, less than 1 mile from her home at 12 Whitlow Drive in Mount Holly's Tarnsfield housing development. The drive was a short distance, but she told the coworker that she could walk the rest of the way, and this would be the last time that the work friend saw her. Lori's mother, Betty, had told her that she would take her to the bank later that day to cash her paycheck and open her first bank account, but the young woman would never arrive home. The last person to have seen her was a neighbor who spotted her walking towards her home at about 5:15 that afternoon. Lori never made it inside. At first, her parents, who she lived with, weren't too concerned because she would often babysit for the neighbors on Friday evenings. Betty believed that her daughter had forgotten about the bank and had instead gone straight to babysitting. The following morning, Lori's father, Terry, and her mother realized that she hadn't returned, and they grew concerned. Betty called a neighbor whose children Lori would regularly babysit, but learned that her daughter never arrived there either. By 9 a.m., concern grew to panic, and with no word from their daughter, the parents contacted the West Hampton Township Police Department, and Lori was subsequently reported missing. While waiting for the police to respond, alarm bells rang once more. The daughter's purse was found in the front yard, but she was gone. Aside from cashing her paycheck, she was also due to babysit for a neighbor the previous evening, but she didn't show up. All of Lori's belongings were left behind that day, including her undriven vehicle, which was expectedly left in the driveway since she didn't have her license yet, and the paycheck, leading investigators to initially assume that she'd left of her own accord. But after the missing woman's parents told them that she wasn't the type to run away, they reconsidered their position, leading them to believe that something more sinister may have taken place. Aside from the purse in the front yard, no other clues or evidence have since come about. Detectives interviewed friends, family, and even ex-partners, all of whom were cleared of suspicion. During these interviews, officials couldn't determine why anyone would want to hurt Lori. Authorities only ever named one person of interest, but there was no evidence to charge them or prove that they were involved. And to this day, Lori's eerie disappearance remains unsolved. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But my name is Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.